I am Rudy Cullen in the CapeCod.com News Center. This is an ongoing segment, a series of episodes that we're doing with Mark Schieldrop from AAA Northeast about the latest trends in some of the automotive industry. Right now, we want to talk a little bit more about how travel has been, especially for Labor Day. We're living now we're in the second summer, as Cape Codders have been referring to it as, and that's been a new trend. But yeah, I just wanted to ask a little bit about how was Labor Day travel in general, summer in general. Give us a recap, and then we're also going to touch on the latest in gas trends as well. So,
Yeah.
Mark, what has been up for Labor Day? How did things go?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Grady. As always, summer's been pretty amazing. I think Labor Day was pretty solid. I would imagine that folks here on the Cape can attest to how busy it was, capping off a really great summer. The weather cooperated vast majority of the season. People were just traveling a lot this year. We saw record numbers over Memorial Day. We saw record numbers over Independence Day. Really strong travel across the board. We saw growth in domestic travel, international travel. And here at the Cape, the reports I saw after the weekend were that volumes were high. You know, there was a lot of people here. So definitely good news for the economy. Interestingly, we are starting to see signs of a little bit of a slowdown in travel, believe it or not. It's been the story the last couple of years. People are just determined to travel. Coming out of the pandemic, there was a little bit of this revenge travel that we saw where people are kind of making up for lost time. You know, I was stuck at home and now I'm going to go see the world. We saw a shift from people accumulating possessions and potted plants and decorating their houses to, I want to have experiences. I want to go places and do things with my family and build memories. So that really spurred unbelievable travel demand over last year, and then this year we shattered records that we hadn't seen since 2005. So for Labor Day, we're still collecting the receipts a little bit. We don't really have a number to share as far as growth. We were forecasting 9% growth in domestic travel year over year, and actually a slight downturn in international travel by 2%. Part of that may be a reflection of the sticker shock that some folks were starting to see when they were trying to book trips, looking at airfare. The dollar, after being unusually strong, really making Europe and other places tantalizing because you get a lot of bang for your buck, that has, the dollar softened a little bit. It's still really strong, but not where it was. Inflation, people are kind of taking it on the chin, just sort of dealing with it. We may have reached a point where people have kind of maxed out and they're saying, you know what, we used our credit card points, we used our air miles, we financed a little bit, we used our savings, we need to take a pause. So we're starting to see slowdown in travel. All year long we've been telling people, don't wait, book now, you're going to miss your chance. Well, now we can't say that anymore. Now we're saying it might actually make sense if you're planning a trip in the second half of the year or the beginning of next year. Waiting a little bit for that flash sale or that pop-up deal, that's going to happen. That you're going to start to see more availability. You're going to see more openings. You're going to start to see some price competition happening. So being a little more on the fence with your travel plans makes sense. But that said, travel is still a growth area. We expect to see strong numbers through the year. But by all accounts, I think it was a really a great year for summer travel, especially in Massachusetts.
All right, great to hear, especially for our local tourism-based economy here on the Cape and Islands. Now, as well, this is we're dovetailing this with a conversation about EVs, and that is involved a lot of talk about gasoline. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about how has the demand been. You kind of have been kind of hitting me with some surprise statistics where travel's up but gas seems down. Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This is a trend that really started to take hold last year, and this year it really started to kind of hit us in the face. For years, when we looked at gasoline demand, it was a really great measurement of overall travel and what's going on. This year, throughout the entire year, except for a few days, but really almost every single day, we're seeing demand below last year's levels. At the same time, we're breaking travel records. So that kind of raises a question, and even when we look at vehicle miles traveled in April and May, for example, we were surpassing last year, but when we look at overall gasoline demand, it's lower. So that has to have a reason, right? And part of it is, and I think this is a natural thing that we're starting to see really take hold, is that cars are more fuel efficient now. The average car on American roads was about 12 and a half years old. So people are holding on to their cars for a very long time, for one thing. But the reality is that every 12 and a half years, one of those old cars is taken off the road and generally replaced with a newer vehicle. 12 and a half years ago, if you look at the average fuel economy of your typical car and you compare it to brand new cars being sold today, there's more hybrids, there's more plug-in hybrids, and there's EVs. So there's enough adoption happening with EVs, and the overall improvement to fuel economy is starting to take a bite out of gasoline demand. So back in the day, in a busy summer week, we'd see easily 10 and a half million barrels a day of gasoline demand. Now this year, when we look at the best, the highest demand figures that we've seen, we never broke 10 really. It was 9.5 is a lot. Weeks where traditionally we'd expect 10 million barrels a day demand, it would fall at 8.8 million. So there's millions of barrels a day that is just not being consumed anymore. It wasn't a temporary phase. Some of it has to do with travel patterns, right? So less people commuting at typical times, less people going to the office 5 days a week. There's more hybrid flexibility with work schedules. So people are going on that long road trip. They're still traveling. They're still hopping in the car and going up to Maine, right? But they're not shuttling back and forth across town multiple times a day. They're not just hopping in the car for a lazy Sunday drive. They're strategically driving around town. They're driving less. They're cutting back on their routine driving, but they're still doing their road trips. So I think that helps explain it a little bit, but it's certainly eye-opening to see the demand figures really change because, as a growing country, as a growing economy, we've seen this line just for decades go up and up and up and up and up, and then here we are. We're starting to see the slow, gradual kind of glide path as we get more efficient, as we get more EVs on the road, and as we begin to maybe consider, at some point, we may be transitioning away from a traditional petroleum-based economy. Not for decades, for sure, but for many folks who analyze the markets, that appreciable bite out of gasoline demand has kind of caught us a little bit by surprise. It's happening maybe a little bit quicker than we thought.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting, and I guess here's hoping that it continues a more gradual change. Lately, I've been seeing too many steep drop-offs in various graphs related to the economy of the United States in general.
Yeah.
But is that going to translate? So for the consumer who's now looking forward to autumn, we're getting close. Are we going to be expecting some maybe cheaper gas prices?
Absolutely. Well, we're already seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to get gas below $3 a gallon throughout Massachusetts now. I just pulled up today's numbers, and someone might catch this at a time, not exactly when we're saying this, but as it stands
Disclaimer.
today, we're shortly after Labor Day. We're in that shoulder season. It's still technically summer. It's not quite fall yet. Traditionally, gas prices fall this time of year and then tend to bottom out in December, January, before they kind of start to slowly build back up as we approach the summer driving season. Right now, in this chair, the average price for a gallon of regular unleaded in Massachusetts is $3.24 a gallon. Last year was $3.74 a gallon, so that's 50 cents a gallon less than we were paying last year. That's going to pay dividends in terms of the cost of transporting goods and services. That's going to help inflation. When we talk about cooling inflation in the second half of the year, hopefully that trend continues. Lower fuel prices is going to play a big role in that. In fact, we're expecting to have, I wouldn't say a crash, but I think the state average is going to be below $3 a gallon before the end of the year. In fact, it could happen before the end of October. And part of that is that lack of demand. Production in the United States is really full steam ahead. We're producing tons of gasoline in the United States right now. We're the world's largest producer of oil. So the supply-demand balance, when we look at it, we're starting to get to a point where refiners are treating gasoline almost as a waste product. They're chasing margins for diesel and jet fuel. Gasoline, they can't help but make gasoline. It's just the way when you refine oil, you get product at various percentages. You can tweak those percentages, but at the end of the day, you're going to make all three for the most part. There's a glut of gasoline coming, and we're going to have more production than demand, and that generally leads to prices being lower. But with the global economy, there's concerns about the global economy through the rest of the year. There's concerns about significant drop-offs in demand in other parts of the world, particularly China. We are anticipating a pretty sharp drop in fuel prices and gasoline prices in the next few weeks, as the wholesale price right now is drastically lower than it normally would be for this time of year. So that traditional slide is going to be more like a steep drop off for the second half of the year. That's great news for folks who are watching their budgets, because gas prices play a really heavy psychological role in people's sense of where the economy is and what's going on with prices. When you get that tick from 3 to 2 at the the handle on the gas price when you're driving by, that just feels so much different, even if it's a penny. And what we're seeing is right now, if you have a gas station that sells for $3.30 a gallon and you've got a Costco or a BJ's down the road at $2.99, the market dramatically shifts to those discount retailers. And so your local gas station is under intense pressure right now to lower prices. They're going to hold on to those margins as long as they can. But the reality is that they can only hold on for so long. So we're expecting to see a pretty steady drop pretty soon.
All right, awesome. Yeah, forget the NASDAQ. I measure the economy in bread and milk and gasoline. That's the real indicators for us.
It's the nuts and bolts.
But also here on Cape Cod, so the gas prices are exceptionally important for Cape Cod, because here we have everything being brought on through 2 bridges, exclusively vehicular. We don't really have ports. We're not really bringing in shipping containers through the Woods Hole Steamship Authority terminal. Nope. So for us, the gas is a little bit more impactful, especially for the poor folks like me out on the Outer Cape. But that is very interesting. It's going to be definitely playing into that second summer that we're pushing for here on the Cape as well, trying to attract more travelers even into the off-season, that best kept secret. Not so much anymore. But yeah, September and November, we'll be seeing if there's more people coming down to enjoy those gas prices.
Lower gas prices is one of those things where you see people just more willing to do that spontaneous travel. You know what? The weekend looks good. Let's just hop in the car and go. Sure. When prices are above $3 a gallon, behavior starts to change. Above $4 a gallon, that's where we see what we call demand destruction. That's where people say, we just can't do it. I just can't do it. When you squeeze that gas pump and watch the numbers climb, the difference between filling up for $60 versus $35, that's massive. And that's the difference between getting that ice cream cake at the grocery store or going to a quick day trip to the Cape. So certainly conducive to people spending in other places. When gas prices were $5 a gallon, we saw real changes in people's behavior. We saw people traveling, but that meant when they were on that trip, they weren't going to that nice restaurant. They were going to that discount, or they were going to the nearby grocery store and having a picnic lunch outside the hotel. They weren't buying souvenirs at the theme park. They weren't getting that add-on package on that resort accommodation. So now people are going to be able to open their wallets up and get those little incidental extra things on that trip because they're feeling that less pressure at the gas pump.
All right, awesome. Let's hopefully see some movement this season. Now, as well, I'm learning that it's going to be time for me to hypermile, see if I can stretch my gas tank a little while longer, so I can fill up in the following weeks from now.
It's one of those times where the longer you wait, the more money you're going to save. Right? So we tend to say don't drive on E when that fuel light comes on. Trying to avoid it, but there is a little bit of a financial incentive to squeeze out a little bit more time before you fill up.
Me and Mark are going to be playing some dangerous games leaving here from the studio today. But I'm afraid that's about all the time that we have. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add for our listeners while I still have you?
No, that's really it. Shop around. When we quote the state average, when you look at the average price, that's the average price. You're going to find savings if you go off the beaten path. Use our app, use other apps and tools out there. You can save. And there's discount programs out there, too, that you can participate in to save a few cents per gallon. It does add up over time. But one thing to note is that when prices are cheap, that means margins are lower. That means the discounts are less great. So you're not going to save 34 cents a gallon, 40 cents off a gallon. That deal might go down to 4 or 5 cents, So, but you can still save if you're just a little bit, careful consumer and shop around.
All right, I'll keep my eyes peeled. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining me for this conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm Gritty Colleen in the CapeCod.com News Center, and thank you for listening.